pretzels and beer. Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. Dust off the sun and moon, sing a song of cheer. Just fill your basket full of sandwiches and wieners. Then lock the house up, now you're set. And on the beach you'll see the girls in their bikinis, as cute as ever, but they never get them wet. Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. Those days of soda and pretzels and beer. Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. You'll wish that summer could always be here. Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. Those days of soda and pretzels and beer. Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. You'll wish that summer could always be here. You'll wish that summer could always be here. You'll wish that summer could always be here.
It's vacation time, and most of us will get to the beach or to camp or to Grandma's house in the family car. When we're on vacation, we tend to forget some important safety rules. Perhaps most important, we forget that vacations and alcohol don't mix and could lead to tragedy. Just before the 4th of July holiday, Governor Mario Cuomo instituted Operation Save a Life, an all-encompassing safety program involving all the agencies of state government and many independent safety organizations.
Let me give you an idea of the magnitude of the problem. Last year, over 650 New Yorkers were killed. 650 New Yorkers. And 18,300 injured as a result of alcohol-related driving accidents. That's a death or injury every 30 minutes. And for those for whom saving lives is not enough, consider this. It's estimated that the societal cost for alcohol-related accidents approaches $1.5 billion per year. That's about $85 for every man, woman, and child in the state.
As you know, the Division of Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse has played a role in analyzing the effects of alcohol in a broad range of highway safety problems and other public safety problems. We recently concluded a study in which we examined the prevalence of alcohol use and intoxication on the part of people who died in accidental injuries. We found a very, very high rate of 47% rate of alcohol involvement in all accidental injuries involving young people in particular, a 23% involvement of people who were intoxicated in all accidental injuries off the highway. So we have a particular concern. We're delighted to be able to work with the Red Cross in engaging our highway safety programs, as well as our efforts to inform the public generally of the potential hazards of alcohol use and the potential hazards of drinking to excess.
In dealing with all aspects of safety and life-saving, there's no organization probably in this country more respected than the American Red Cross. And that's why I'm particularly pleased that they've agreed to join our efforts to work with us on Operation Save a Life this summer and beyond. We will be doing all that we can together to help prevent as many deaths and injuries as possible.
When people recreate, they think that they can break every rule that they would have to follow if they were in a car. Let's say drinking and driving. Well, you don't drink and drive, you don't drink and swim, you don't drink and hike, you don't drink and use small craft. And what ends up happening there is we end up with disorientation. People lose sight of where they are. They're unable to function properly in the cold water. As you know, in our area here, the cold water is probably 70 degrees at the warmest north of Albany. That would be the warmest it would ever get. Well, at 70 degrees, that seems to be the critical temperature in hypothermia. In other words, that kicks off the hypothermic reflex or the mammalian diving reflex. And so people who are having their 4 beers before they decide to go swim after lunch. The alcohol has a major impact on the onset of hypothermia. It causes vasodilation of the external arteries and the capillaries in the skin, causes increased heart rate, which keeps the blood beating to the surface of the skin, thereby cooling down faster. It also causes disorientation in the brain, things like that. So the one big area that we'd have to really focus on our vacations or recreating around the water is we should really focus in on not drinking and participating in those activities, because it can have a detrimental effect.
Summertime is a very festive time. It's party time. Everybody's out enjoying themselves. And one of the things that I think is real important to keep in mind is that alcohol, by virtue of the fact that it's a mood-changing drug, that it's a sedative drug, changes the ability of the person to perceive the situation that they're actually involved in. You hear it all the time with people drinking and driving. Well, I'm not drunk, I'm okay, I can drive. Same thing in terms of swimming accidents, drowning deaths, boating deaths, falls. I'm close to the edge, but that's okay, it's not that risky. Again, their perception is very different than the reality.
It's a difficult thing, I guess, to probably put it the easiest way. One of the difficult thing on the job for a trooper or any police officer is to wind up in the middle of the night going to someone's house and having to inform him that some loved one, child or husband, was killed in an auto accident. And we find that the worst part of that is we find out that the accident was unnecessary because somebody was drinking and driving.
The combination of drinking and driving is something that is so deadly, and particularly in terms of a family. You know, in vacations where people are out with their family, nothing can be more harmful than the combination of drinking and driving. I think all of us are familiar with the fatality statistics. All of us are familiar, I think, also with the injury statistics, and they're horrifying. Yet people continue to do it. We oftentimes stress, too, the economic consequences to the driver, for example, of just one arrest for arrest and conviction for drunken driving. Just to enumerate, the fine is going to be about $350. You're going to have to go to a rehabilitation course at a cost of about $200. Your insurance, or before you even get to the insurance, you're going to probably hire an attorney, because drunken driving is a crime and you don't want that on your record. The attorney's fee can run anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. Then after you're convicted, your insurance is going to be canceled. In the assigned risk plan, you may be paying double, triple what you've been paying. Say an additional $1,000 a year for a 3-year period. You add it all up, you're talking $6,000, $7,000 just for that one single offense. So clearly, drinking and driving makes no sense from the viewpoint of the hazard to life and limb, and the impact on the pocketbook of the average family in terms of that amount of cost simply for that one offense.
You know, the cost in New York State alone is over $4 billion a year, and those costs directly associated to alcoholism and alcohol-related problems. Hospital admissions, anywhere from 20 to 35% of all hospital admissions are directly related to alcohol. Sooner or later, we've got to pay attention. And I think that finally we're starting to pay the kind of attention that's needed and necessary.
50% of all of our drownings and small craft accidents the person has been involved with the use of alcohol in some way or another. Now, we know that your 4-year-old children to about 14 don't get involved with the alcohol, but that's still only about 600 or 700 of our drownings on a nationwide basis. But the feeling is 50% would be a very conservative number of people being involved with alcohol and ending up in some type of a watercraft or swimming accident.
One of the things that I looked at in terms of the research was the statistics regarding just the issue of life and death as it relates specifically to alcohol use. Obviously, we focused an awful lot of alcohol and highway safety death, so that obviously from that 50% of those deaths are in fact alcohol related. But beyond that, there's a lot of other things. Pedestrian death is of about 33% alcohol related. Murder victims, anywhere from 40 to 60% of the victims were intoxicated at the time. Suicide death, up to 64% of attempts are done under the influence, and about 80% of all successful suicides are done under the influence. Boating and drowning deaths, different research says anywhere from 50 to 69% of the victims were intoxicated at the time. Fire deaths, up to 83% of the fatalities associated with fire death are in fact alcohol related. Fatal falls from a whole variety of circumstances, anywhere from 50% alcohol related. Industrial accidents, 40% fatalities, alcohol related. And that's just a real quick thumbnail sketch of the involvement of alcohol in a whole range of death that many times we don't talk about, many times we don't think about.
I think people have to look at moderation. We know that our people, our number one group of people that are drowning and also involved in motor vehicle accidents are the 18 to 24-year-old age group, and we know they're also the ones that use alcohol indiscriminately and probably really don't hone in on what the alcohol will do as far as impairment later on. The beer now doesn't cause any relationship in their thinking. What happens if I have a beer now and one every 15 minutes and then drive 2 hours from now? Or take that motorboat out and pull somebody water skiing, and then all of a sudden, geez, they forget that they need a spotter. The guy falls off the water skis. The guy continues to drive the boat, and the guy on the water skis said, well, I don't need a water safety belt because I know I'm a good swimmer. But he gets the air knocked out of him. The guy driving the boat doesn't see him. This guy goes down, and he becomes a statistic. Or a person's rational thinking can be impaired, and he doesn't remember that, geez, a person with a neck and back injury who's just fallen water skiing, we're supposed to immobilize, not bend him as we pull him into the boat. And so he forgets this, he pulls the guy in, and we have a quadriplegic instead of a person with maybe only a spinal injury, but who is able to be totally rehabilitated. So attitudes have to be changed, but I think people have to understand that moderation is the rule to follow. We're not trying to say, from a safety perspective, no, don't drink, it's going to kill everybody. Well, it's obvious. If it was, we'd have half the population would die every year. It's moderation and knowing the effects of alcohol and exercise. A person who is running around profusely sweating and then comes and has 4 or 5 beers real quick, it goes into the system very fast because the system is trying to replenish the fluids that it has lost. So moderation is the rule, and before you get to the point of confused mental capacities, think about what's going to happen, what you're going to do 3 or 4 hours later, and I believe that will help.
We've, of course, been vigorously supporting the governor's efforts to mandate a drinking age of 21. It is the sound solution. It would address this problem in a very forceful and direct way, and we know of no other more effective way of reducing the carnage on the highways caused by young people.
First of all, when you're pulled over, what will happen is the officer is going to run some preliminary tests at the roadside to make a determination whether you're intoxicated or not. These include some psychophysical tests, which are, I'm sure everyone has seen, touch the nose, pick up coins, similar tests as that. Once he's determined to be intoxicated, the person's arrested. He's taken in and given a test, either breathalyzer test, blood test, or whatever. Once the test is taken, such as the breath test, it's determined that he's above the 1.0. He's taken then before a magistrate for arraignment. And like I say, it would wind up into a trial, if necessary, or plead guilty or whatever, and then a conviction.
And the penalties?
Penalties, if you're talking DWI, we're minimum $350 to $500. You're talking up to a year in jail and a 6-month revocation of the license. Second offense in 10 years, we're talking about a felony, which is more serious. The first charge is a misdemeanor. With the felony, we're talking $500 to $5,000 fine. We're talking up to 4 years in jail. And again, we're talking about a revocation of license, this time for a minimum of a year.
There's a killer striking down young New Yorkers. The killer is drunk driving. It leaves parents without children, friends without friends. It ends lives before they really begin. This is Governor Cuomo. Drunk driving is an epidemic among young people. To join our fight against it, write to me in Albany. We can save hundreds of young lives, but it would be worth it even if we saved just one. Drunk driving. It's a tragedy we can prevent.
I'm Donald Chesworth, Superintendent of the New York State Police. There's no more room in our society for people who drink excessively and then drive. In at least 2 countries, drunk driving is considered serious enough to be a capital offense. We don't go that far, But the New York State Police are going to get the drunk drivers off our roads and keep them off. Because we care about safety. Every last one of us.
Sir, yes, sir!
Government is finally recognizing that it alone has the facilities and the manpower and the responsibility and the urgency to address a problem that has grown worse and worse year after year. Years ago, the problem didn't exist because the young people either didn't have the money to drink or the money to buy a car or to do them both in combination. But that combination of a car, a youthful driver who's been drinking is so deadly that most states in the United States have already addressed it by making the drinking age 21. New York has put its foot in the water, so to speak, going from 18 to 19, but the real need is to go to 21. It's not Big Brother. It's a sensible way of addressing a public health problem of immense proportions and a way of addressing that no other way can really solve.
I think you've got to remove yourself from the situation, especially if you're 19 or 20, and look at it as an outsider and say, okay, what's happening? Who's getting killed? And you see that the people that are getting killed are 19 and 20-year-olds. We've got the highest death rates now. And if we've got the highest death rates, something should be done to protect us. And if you look at the people who are the offenders, we're also the offenders. So you've got to come down on the offenders to protect the victims.
From all the research that we've seen, it's anywhere from 10 to 13% of the whole population in New York State, in fact, suffers from alcoholism. That comes to about 1.4 million people. And one of the things that's real important to understand about the disease of alcoholism is the direct and significant impact that that alcoholism has not only on the individual, but also on the family and on the children. And when you start to talk about the family and the impact on the family, you're talking about unbelievable numbers of people being directly affected by someone's alcoholism. And then when you start to talk about the 500,000 plus children from alcoholic families, who are in fact the highest risk group for future alcoholism, as well as a whole variety of other problems, learning disabilities, anxiety, stress and medical related problems, etc., you're talking about a real significant number of people in this state.
I had purchased some beer through a store. I wasn't ID'd or nothing, but I fell off a bridge and broke my neck like, well, 14 years ago. I was taking a shortcut across the bridge, which is a bridge that I did before, but this particular night, because I was drinking, I slipped, I fell. I broke my neck. That's pretty much why I'm in the chair. Say one person dies in a car accident, like, you know, people don't understand that that's not the only person that gets affected, you know. I guess I'm looking at it, even myself, I didn't die, I was close to it, but I have 12 brothers and sisters, so I had a lot of grief in the family because my father had to deal with it, my sisters and brothers had to deal with it, my friends had to deal with it, aunts and uncles, and all of a sudden we're not dealing with one person anymore. We're dealing with maybe 30 people that were affected by my one night out drinking. I never thought that it would happen to me because, of course, like, you know, I'm out. I did it before. It's not going to happen. You know, I'm going to make it through the night. And I think if a lot of people are honest with themselves, they know that when they're drinking, all of a sudden you become this different person anyways. You know, you're much braver and, you know, you can take on the world and do other things that normally you couldn't do if maybe you were sober or... But yeah, I was one of those people that thought that I could handle it, and you know, it's a fact now that it shows that I didn't and I couldn't. You know, I have to relive my past, you know, maybe 2-3 times a week, explaining it to schools or to individuals on the street, and that's something that I have come to deal with inside of myself that I have to do because. I guess I'm educating the public, or I feel like I am, just about my disability and who I am as a person and maybe why I'm in a wheelchair. And maybe they'll take a second look at it. Or maybe some night when they're out, like, you know, for some reason I might flash through their mind
you know, of someone that's severely disabled, you know, because of drinking. You know, this accident because of drinking isn't something I can ever take back, you know. I mean, I can smash up a car and go down to the used car lot and buy a new one the next day and stuff. But I mean, when you're talking about your physical condition and your mind and whatever, that's something that's a one-time thing, you know. And I was out drinking and it happened, and I can never take it back. And I think that people should really take that to heart.
One thing that really concerns me is mom and dad using the double standard. Son and daughter, don't drink, it's bad for you, you can't have a beer, or you can only have a sip. And then mom and dad get quietly inebriated on the beach watching their children swim. What we've done is developed a long-range pattern for the kids to follow. People learn by doing, people learn by watching, and by example. If son and daughter see mom and dad pickle themselves on the beach or on the sailboat, then it just seems reasonable that 10 years later that they would assume that's the thing to do.
Well, I don't think that the governor's in a dangerous area at all. I think that the governor is in a place that's a very courageous place, because it's a place that many other politicians have not gone before in terms of trying to raise the community awareness and recognition of the role that alcohol and alcoholism play in this society. It's, I think, absolutely appropriate for the governor to take that kind of leadership role. As we've talked before, our position is very clearly supporting the governor's work specifically on 21. Our major concern is that we make the whole 21 purchase age discussion an alcohol and youth issue, one aspect of which is alcohol and highway safety. But it begins to address all the other issues that we talked about. If you take a look at the number 2 cause of death in the age group under 21, it's suicide. If you take a look at number 3, it's homicide and other violent death. So that what you've got is that in that particular age group, the benefit is very substantial from a preventive standpoint. And I think the governor is absolutely appropriate in addressing that concern.
I'm very pleased with the governor's perspective on Operation Save a Life and through education. Our big thrust should be, though, and my own personal bias, we've got to get at the young children, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. We know through the contemporary research that we can make lifestyle changes in children. We can develop health habits in those ages, and they'll carry on in life. The 14, 15, 16-year-old will make a change immediately because of education. A year or two later, they are doing absolutely what they did before. I don't believe we will change too many of the adults' attitudes and lifestyle habits. And it's very unfortunate because it'll take a death in a family before all of a sudden nobody will be allowed to drink on their boat, or nobody will be allowed to drink if they're going to drive the car. But our society is one in recreation that has decided unless somebody really dies, we're not going to make a change. You can't force me to follow rules when I recreate, because you give me all these rules to follow when I work and things like that. Don't tell me how to recreate. So it takes a life. Somebody has to die, and then certain changes will come about. And it's very unfortunate. But I'm very happy that he's looking at the educational thrust. We know that 80% of the causes of death that we have today in America are all lifestyle changes, things you and I could change in our life and prevent somebody from dying or prevent ourselves from dying. But we don't, you know, so I wish we could. But education's the way to go for sure. But we really have to look at some innovative approaches as to how we're going to get to the adult in this situation and actually bring about a lifestyle or health change. That's the challenge. The concept is great.
One of the things that's characterized in addressing the whole issue of alcoholism and alcohol-related problems is a general issue of denial. And a real denial that alcohol is not that much of a problem. Alcohol is fun, it's enjoyable, it's a good time. And again, that denial makes it almost impossible for people to see the kind of reality that we talk about here in terms of the numbers. The only way that we can effectively overcome that denial is basic education. And certainly this show is an opportunity to do that. People need to start to take an honest look at what role has alcohol begun to play in their life, and what impact and what effect does that role have. I don't see our position in any way as saying to people, don't drink. That's not a reasonable position. Our feeling is that what people need to do is take an honest look at what role has alcohol begun to play in the society. And what role has it begun to play in my life? And for most people, it's the kind of thing they've never given any thought to. They've never thought about it. It's just the thing that everybody does. You just do it. And as a result, we're paying dearly with it in terms of costs, in terms of people's lives, and sooner or later, we've got to do something.
Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. Those days of soda and pretzels and beer. Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. Dust off the sun and moon and sing a song of cheer. Just fill your basket full of sandwiches and weenies. Then lock the house up, now you're set. And on the beach you'll see the girls in their bikinis, as cute as ever, but they never get 'em wet. Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. Those days of soda and pretzels and beer. Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. You wish that summer could always be here. Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. Those days of soda and pretzels and beer. Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. You wish that summer could always be here. You wish that summer could always be here. You wish that summer